With every fighting game released nowadays, it's guaranteed the game will receive support after its launch. One of the biggest ways of doing this is with brand new DLC fighters, new characters released months or even years into the game's lifespan. While most people love new characters and they are considered a net good, there are a lot of times where a group of players hate a new character and call them broken. This is usually because the character feels way too strong and has tools that feel better than everyone else in the cast, like Leroy Smith, Street Fighter IV Yun, or the infamous Team $15. But the characters I want to talk about today fall into a different category of broken. Characters who release in a state where the game itself starts to break around them, whose existence probably wasn't even tested. Characters that introduce new bugs to the game that impact the play experience in drastic ways. There's not a ton of examples of this to talk about, but I think I managed to scrounge up some really fun ones. Let's get into it. I think a good place to start and help explain what exactly I mean is a game with a variety of infamous characters. Smash Bros. DLC has always been controversial, with a large dedication to translating the source game's mechanics often leading to powerful and arguably game-breaking tools. Smash Ultimate has quite a few infamous DLC characters with Kazuya, Steve, and Min Min all breaking the rules of the game in some way. But if you wanted to see where DLC was at its most broken, you'd have to go back to the days of Smash 4. Bayonetta was a character the game was just not built to handle, with an incredible combo game like no other. Her combos were nearly impossible to escape, and she had an extremely long-lasting counter that if connected early in its startup guaranteed her a free combo. These factors made her the undisputed best character in the game and made the game revolve around her. Cloud is probably another character that came to mind. In doubles, he was actually banned entirely due to how effective he was. His huge range and instantly strong limit moves made him really hard to play against. And while these characters were certainly overpowered, nothing about them was functioning incorrectly. So what DLC character in Smash 4 could possibly be game-breaking like that? Well, for that, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. At first glance, the release of Mewtwo in Smash 4 was completely fine. They were a strong character, but not meta-defining. Their moveset retained a lot of the same tools as Melee, but with some good buffs allowing them to compete with the rest of the cast. However, one thing that Mewtwo and the rest of the DLC characters lacked was that they could not equip custom moves and always had to use their defaults. Or could they? In the same patch that Mewtwo was added, a glitch existed that allowed you to transfer custom equipment from a downloaded Mii to any of the base roster. And this included Mewtwo, who normally would not have access to this. This allowed for some extremely strange moves that were very obviously not intended. The custom forward special would grab the opponent and cause them to get stuck under Mewtwo, where they could either rack up damage and try to kill with a final smash if items were enabled, or more likely, just jump off the stage and kill the opponent first. Their custom neutral special let them teleport to the right side of the stage and enter a stance where they were invisible. In this mode, all of their tilts would hit the entire screen, trivializing most fights. Mewtwo's custom up special isn't much to talk about. It was effectively just a more spammable disable without a hitbox, which could help with recovery sometimes. However, by far Mewtwo's most iconic special was his custom down special. When used, Mewtwo activates a cool spin animation and puts every opponent into a full screen time slowdown similar to the timer or witch time. I don't think I need to explain how broken this is, effectively rendering your opponents immobile with zero counterplay, and being able to reset it mid-combo. Due to restrictions on custom moves, I doubt anyone actually used Customs Mewtwo outside of trolling their friends, but the character broke a ton of records in the single-player modes like Crazy Orders and Break the Targets because of just how absurd this kit was. Customs Mewtwo is an oddity I don't hear a lot of people talk about anymore, and I'm kinda shocked about that, as I think he might be the strongest character to ever grace the Smash Bros. Series. Street Fighter V was a game with quite a history. From its rocky launch to its incredible comeback, there's 5 seasons and 5.5 years of history to look at. With that much time of active development, it's bound to have something go wrong. And it had plenty of goofs, from the ridiculous power of Abigail to Dan's notorious infinite fireball loop. But none of this could stack up to the curious case that was Blanka. Blanka released during Season 3 and was long awaited to return to the roster. Upon release, Blanka was surprisingly unremarkable. He wasn't a bad character by any means, but he played how you expect. However, he was hiding a secret that was in the game for months before it was discovered, that if known would have made him by far the best character in the game. Fighting games often have overlapping inputs where one button can produce a variety of outcomes, like a heavy punch, a fireball, or a super fireball. Players could also potentially input multiple things in the same frame, which can cause issues. To remedy this, most fighting games have a short window where they can parse your inputs, and will use whatever move has the highest priority. If you input these moves within a few frames of each other, the one that will actually come out is based on this priority, and the game is designed around it. Within the order, you have fun tech like Kara cancels to get a little bit more out of your buttons, canceling an advancing move into a special or throw. But there's a lot of moves that have weird properties on frame 1 that you have to look out for, and those moves are specifically coded to deal with those consequences. Unfortunately, Blanka had a really interesting oversight that let him ignore this cancel order. Blanka's surprise forward is a command dash that can be special cancelled, but it has some strange properties. For whatever reason, the game treats this move with a much higher priority than it should. My best guess as to what happened is that surprise forward can be performed from Blanka's V-Skill 1, Coward Crouch. The game thinks that this move might be a V-Skill. Why this is a problem is that this allows you to Kara cancel a super in a way the game doesn't expect, and like most supers, upon inputting the move, the game freezes for the super animation. However, because you canceled out of the super and the game doesn't realize, you are able to freeze your opponent completely. This also does not cost any super meter. This only lasts for the normal duration of the super freeze, but it can be repeated infinitely and give you more than enough time to see what your opponent was doing and punish them for it. A frame 1 meterless time stop is absolutely ridiculous, so the technique was banned almost as soon as it was discovered and was patched out shortly after. But I always just think about just how crazy it is that such a powerful technique was hiding for an entire year and nobody discovered it. With how many people are playing these games, you'd think it would have been found much faster, but it really shows how completely unexpected this trick was. NetherRealm Studios' fighting games have a bit of a controversial reputation. They're fun games with huge rosters and some really interesting customization, but at times the polish of these games tends to be lacking. Mortal Kombat 1, their latest title, is no stranger to horrible bugs and glitches, from the Switch version just having the characters go wherever they want, or Player 1 having a significant advantage with more combo routes than Player 2 at launch. A handful of bugs popped up with the DLC characters too, like unblockable resets and some weirdly inconsistent frame data. But the character that I saw the most insane bugs with was Homelander. Oh boy. To make him stand out from the similar Superman-esque Omni-Man, they decided to give Homelander a flight stance similar to characters in the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. With it, he could cancel his combos into flight that would allow him to fly in 8 directions and use air attacks without losing any height. However, this stance absolutely was not tested properly and caused a ton of issues. Flight cancels wouldn't cost any meter, but wouldn't work unless you had meter. Moves coming out way faster than they were intended leaded to easy infinites on block. Canceling out of certain moves would cause Homelander to see a drastic speed increase, which made you fast enough to block while moving. For better or for worse, everything about this move did not function in some way. All of these things plagued the character's release, and did serve to make Homelander's reception fairly unwelcoming. Would you believe that isn't even the worst of it? I can only assume that because of Homelander's flight, they had to make some new custom camera logic to accommodate such strange movement. But whether he even uses the flight or not, when he was in the match, sometimes the camera would just stop working. Either it would just be offset in a weird way, or just stop tracking the characters entirely, thinking Homelander is frozen somewhere completely different than he actually is. When this happened, it made matches with Homelander borderline unplayable, as no player could actually see what was going on. Pile on the fact that Homelander's mobility means he's going to be all over the screen, and you're just not going to be able to deal with it. Of course, this did all get patched pretty quickly, but it has to be one of the most absurd launches that I've ever seen for almost any DLC character. In fact, I can really only think of 2 other characters that launched in a worse state. I weirdly haven't talked about this game on my channel much, but if you know me, you knew this was coming. Them's Fightin' Herds had one of the most catastrophic DLC launches of any game that not only had devastating effects on the game forever, but also completely destroyed the reputation of the game's publisher, Maximum Entertainment Games. In November of 2023, the Them's Fightin' Herds Steam page would announce some terrible news. After the first wave of DLC, the game would be done. That meant no Season 2 and no story mode. They also showed that the 3rd DLC character, Nidra, was nearing completion and dropped some more info on the never-before-seen 4th, Baiha. A few months later, news started to circulate that the entire team was let go, save for a few people. They clearly did not have the team remaining to finish these characters, and yet somehow, the final 2 characters released at the same time on February 22nd of 2024, with absolutely no announcement, no fanfare, not even a tweet. The community soon discovered their inclusion, and it was immediately understood why there was no announcement for these 2. Maximum was trying to get away with shipping 2 obviously unfinished characters and hoping that not enough people would notice. They noticed. Let's start with Nidra, the least broken of the 2. Nidra is mostly finished aside from a polish run through, but she did have some problems with 2 moves in her kit, Night Stance and Blooming Lotus. Nidra has a variety of stances which give her a ton of unique follow-ups, but what makes Night Stance so unique is that it builds her magic meter while using it, and most interestingly, she can go into it when knocked down as an alternative to attack roll. This has a few weird properties, such as cancelling the stance having invincibility frames for some reason, but the main bug with this move is its reversal follow-up. When you successfully land this move, for some reason I can't even fathom, it disables special properties from the opponent's moves, like ground bounce, wall stick, and stagger for their next combo. I can't even fathom what level of spaghetti code would cause something like this to happen. Blooming Lotus is Nidra's super, where she rises into the sky with a dangerous aura surrounding her. At launch, this super did not like armor moves, as trying to armor through it would crash the game. Where this move got really broken was that with the right setup, you could cancel into the follow-up Lotus Seed immediately after starting the super to completely freeze the opponent. In this state, they can't attack or be attacked and just have to sit there until the timer ends. This was an absolute disaster and meant that if anyone had the 2 bars for it, they could win the round if they had the life lead. And somehow, all of this wasn't enough to stop her from being seen as fairly tame compared to the absolute train wreck she was released alongside. Baiha feels like a character that wasn't even playtested, and that's because as far as we know, she wasn't, because all the playtesters were let go by the time she was actually finished. I know it goes against the spirit of the video to talk about balanced things, but I do need to discuss some of them just so you understand just how utterly unfinished this character was. Traditionally, fighting games have some sort of air action limit or otherwise have some modifier that prevents you from spamming special moves in the air for stalling. Baiha does not have this, and her Air 214 special, Backdraft, gives her height, letting her fly infinitely. She has an invincible reversal in Return Fire that was both the fastest reversal in the game and relatively safe under the right circumstances. However, this move wasn't really all that important aside from the fact it also reflected projectiles, as all of her specials were coded as invincible reversals. Combo enders and block string pressure alike was completely invulnerable and completely unpunishable. Baiha's universal anti-air and the projectiles appeared to completely ignore the infinite prevention system, leading to a slew of easy infinites. Baiha's super has the same problems with armor that Nidra's does, but it also hits full screen with almost no visual, so your only choice is to block it or armor it, crashing the game. There's a bunch of other broken stuff like a projectile that combos into itself, but arguably the most broken part of her kit is the artillery stance, and you can tell how rushed it was. It's a stance that while in it gives you magic, and it can be cancelled into special attacks by using magic. Never seen that one before. Her standard attacks are just more spammable versions of her normal projectiles, but her unique specials in this stance are just plain silly. She has a counter that allows her to do an armored reversal, which lost to supers, but also lets you tech out and escape them, even cinematic ones. And as much as I don't know if this counts, as it's not really a bug, but more of a move they didn't finish on time, I have to talk about Siege Cannon. Siege Cannon drains her entire magic meter for an armored attack with a full screen tracking plus unblock projectile fast enough for her to throw out 2 of them a second with perfect execution. Getting hit by this projectile launches you high in the air and right to Baiha. And remember how I said they forgot to make her projectiles check the infinite prevention? That applies to this move too. You may be thinking, oh well this needs full meter so it can't be that bad, and yeah, that's how it's currently implemented. But at launch, all your meter could be no meter for the same result. There's zero counterplay to this move, you just lose, good day. Overnight, this update killed all goodwill that people had for Maximum Entertainment. Maximum was making its way into the fighting game scene with quite a few games like God of Rock and Diesel Legacy, which each had their own problems. They even announced an Avatar The Last Airbender game shortly before this update. But at the end of the day, with how bad of a blunder this was, there's so much scrutiny on them to see if they can even handle a project like that. They did eventually release an update to fix some of the issues with Nidra and Baiha, but a lot of them still persist. For example, Baiha still has a game crash and thus is still banned from competitive play. The whole thing is a horror story, and I hope that one day Main 6 is able to get the rights back and can assemble a team to make things right. I know I'd contribute to a second Kickstarter for more story and DLC. It's just so sad to see such a prolific game go out not with a bang, but with a slow, sad whimper. In a world where every new character release is referred to as breaking the game, it's really interesting to look back at the instances where that actually happened. Making fighting games is hard, and I think it's really fascinating to look at what caused these things to be the way that they are. A simple oversight can completely change the way that a character functions, and I just think that's so fascinating. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this with me, and I would love to hear if any of you know any more instances of this. There were a few I debated about including, but I didn't think were interesting enough, or just couldn't find evidence were actually bugs. I thought this topic was super fun to research, so I'd love to hear more if you have more to share. Until next time!